the fourth year for the employee engagement survey that we've done. So every year we go out and we gather employers, employees, and look at what's changed from the year before, and what kind of the outlooks are in terms of employee engagement this year. And last year there was probably 2 job openings for every person looking for a job. So it was obviously a really strong employee. Employees had a lot of power at the time. This year it's a little bit different, but it's kind of similar. We're seeing from our clients still a lot of economic uncertainties. There's that question about what's the future look like, and there's kind of in quotes only 1.7 job openings for every person looking. But it's still really kind of an interesting market. So again, wanted to kind of present the results of our survey, and obviously if you have questions coming along, let me know. Introduced Erin already. She was very active in the survey and will help answer questions as we go through with it. And also want to introduce, we've got a new organization company that we're working with called Talent Strategy Collection. And they started this year with a focus on helping smaller and mid-sized companies create effective talent management strategies. So they offer a wide range of asynchronous courses to help those companies develop their talent management processes and improve their own employee engagement. So just again, a little bit before we begin about me, Sigrid Group, Erin. My name is Mike Durgis. I'm partner with the Sigrid Group. I'd say I'm a recovering consultant. So I spent 10 years as an international strategy consultant, was chief operating officer for a tier 1 auto supplier, and then the last 9 or 10 years in management recruiting and founder of Sigrid Group. We are a boutique management search and leadership consulting firm. We work with great employers to really help them attract, develop, and retain amazing talent. Personally, I'm a big fan of engagement surveys, and as I was mentioning earlier, we've run this survey for the last 4 years. And it really, personally, it allows me to kind of combine my passion of recruiting with kind of a love of consulting and working with clients. So, every year when we put this together, we're looking for a good, kind of a hook or a theme for the presentation. And this year, it really does seem like it's the Wild West, from, economy, politics, talent management. The good, the bad, and the surprising seemed like the theme for us. And across the survey results that we'll talk about, there's definitely some good news regarding employee engagement and satisfaction. Obviously, there's some concerning or bad news, and there's also some things that just kind of surprised us and we think are worth taking a closer look at. So as we dive in, I think the goals today are, one, to address some of your talent management challenges. So we'll talk about that. Discuss the data that we've collected and identify information that we might be able to take away from the survey. And lastly, look at a couple of concrete actions to hopefully improve engagement internally. As we get into it, mention this is our 4th annual. The first survey was March 2020, kind of just as COVID lockdown started. And we really focused on employees' concerns around COVID. 2021, we were asking how employers responded to the pandemic and what employees felt was most important about that response. Last year was really focused on the Great Resignation. Were employees really quitting in greater numbers? And quite frankly, the answer was yes. And then this year, we decided to focus on kind of overall engagement, how engaged people are feeling in the work they're doing, and also taking a look at how that engagement has changed, now that we've settled into what really is kind of a new normal now. And with each one of our surveys, we focus on kind of 3 areas. 2 of them stay consistent year to year, and then the third one, changes a little bit depending on what the issues of the day are. But the first one is that engagement, where we talk about, how engaged. We've got 12 different motivators that we ask about. And we'll ask whether you're satisfied with those motivators and how important they are. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Culture questions we ask also stay consistent year to year so that we can kind of see changes on communication within the organization, senses of belonging within the organization, that sort of thing. And then the last piece, sorry, switch those. The last piece is engagement this year, which was a focus on how engaged employees are in the work that they're doing. We also asked again whether they're thinking about moving, changing jobs in the next 12 months. So we'll talk about each one of those as we go through the process. And some of the key questions that that we wanted to answer through the survey and that we'll look at are, on the engagement side, are people planning to leave? Is engagement important in that decision process? On the satisfaction side, how has satisfaction changed this year? Which motivators are up, which are down? What are people thinking? And also, what's most important to your employees in terms of the things that they're looking at? And then on the culture side, how do people feel about company culture? And again, we'll dig a little bit deeper into that as we get into it. On the engagement side, again, asked how engaged is the workforce. Some of the sample questions we looked at are you considering leaving your job? I'm excited about the work I'm doing. I'm able to show up to work as myself. And so we dug into that both. There's some generational details and also some differences between whether people were considering leaving and whether they weren't. On the good side here, I think the surprising or the good aspect is people are engaged. 76% of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed that they are engaged in the work that they're doing. And 52% said that they spent 60% or more of the time doing work that they're passionate about. So that's really positive in terms of having that engagement. Doing work that you're passionate about leads to kind of less opportunity for burnout. On the bad side, we had 48% of the respondents said that they're considering leaving their job, which is actually a big increase from last year. So there's a large number of people that are out there kind of looking for the next thing. Breaking that down, 41% of them said they're leaving because of poor communication from leadership. 37% disagreed or strongly disagreed that their manager meets with them weekly, one-on-one, and knows what their personal development needs are. So as we talk about that, that's kind of some low-hanging fruit, I think, in terms of opportunity for improvement. And then looking at the surprising, for us anyway, for me anyway, 55% of Gen Xers said they were likely to leave. So that there's a big generational difference. Those Gen Xers are thinking about moving more than the rest, whereas the average for everyone else was about 40%. And then millennials and Gen Z, maybe counterintuitively, were most likely to strongly agree that they were engaged in the work that they're doing at 45% and 50%. So you've got stronger engagement and kind of stronger engagement from the younger generations and less stickiness right now from Gen X. On the engagement side, we asked, are you engaged in the work that you're doing? And again, encouraging, 39% strongly agreed that they're engaged. Another 37% agreed that they were engaged. However, you've still got that 13% or so that aren't engaged and either disagreeing or strongly disagreeing. So given the uncertainties and the challenges that, kind of we've been talking about, it's encouraging to see that, kind of high level of engagement, but you've still got that concern where, a tenth plus of your workforce is kind of disengaged in the work that they're doing. And then we dug into that again a little bit in terms of how much time people spend doing work that they're passionate about, as we talked about. And actually, for me, this is good news and kind of falls into that surprising category a little bit. There was a study done on burnout in the Mayo Clinic amongst healthcare providers. And there was a really strong correlation that showed that people who were doing work that they were passionate about were less likely to experience burnout. And the threshold they found was about 20%. So if less than 20% of your day involves doing work that you're passionate about, and then obviously 80% or more you're not so passionate about, you're much more likely to experience burnout. And so anything above 20% there is positive. And they didn't find strong correlation, whether it was 20% or 50%, that likelihood of burnout was much less once you hit that 20% threshold. So from our standpoint and the results here, it's really encouraging that of the respondents, 90% of the participants are spending 20% or more of their day doing work that they're passionate about. So again, surprising, but also a good kind of a good result. And then talked a little bit about the generational aspects and looking at folks who are considering leaving. And as we said, the overall is about 48% considering leaving in the next year. But of that, the number is, baby boomers and millennials did not change so much, roughly 40%. But it's that the Gen X at 55% and actually the Gen Z 54% that's a little bit higher and a little bit more surprising. So, from an employer standpoint, there's a couple of approaches you can take kind of using this data. And honestly, from our clients, we've seen all of those. One is just kind of stick your head in the sand model, pretend there's no risk, and just kind of hope that everybody stays. There's the prayer model. So, again, it's kind of, you really don't change anything, but hope your best people don't leave. And then you can take a more proactive approach and be proactive about retention, as we talked about, creating that stickiness and helping people understand the progressions, where they can go and what their opportunities are. But it also means understanding why people are considering leaving. So again, digging down for those that are considering leaving, asking, what are some of the key reasons? And poor communication from leadership led the list this year, followed by not being appropriately compensated. It was interesting that compensation number was lower this year than last year. So not sure why that flipped from communication from compensation rather to communication this year. But then we've also seen culture changing, and that showed up a lot in kind of the comments section of it. People not feeling part of the team, the ever popular "it's my manager" as another reason, and then lower on the commute time and required to be on site 100% of the time. So still an issue, but not as big of an issue in terms of why employees are leaving. So this slide, I'm not supposed to have favorites. I need to love all my data equally, but this slide really is one of my favorites from the presentation. And it splits between those that are saying they're staying and those that are considering leaving, and looks at the differences between satisfaction, engagement, and getting down to Christine, the communication side. The question around "my manager meets with me weekly," and so there's within this, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, or maybe the cart and the horse, depending on your farming analogy. And so, where the causal relationship is, are people leaving because they're dissatisfied, or are people dissatisfied because, and considering leaving? But the average satisfaction is 18% lower for people who are considering leaving. Looking at the other metrics, 19% are not engaged and are spending less than 20% of their day doing work they're not passionate about, or doing work they're passionate about. And 24% feel that they can't show up as themselves. So there's a big kind of difference or split between those that are considering leaving and those that are considering staying. But getting to that, kind of the biggest difference, and I think where as leaders, we can have really an immediate and kind of a free impact, is on that meeting with our people. So those who are considering leaving, down those bottom two lines, are much less likely to have regular weekly interactions with their managers. And this, we're talking about, 15-minute one-on-one conversations where you can talk about, a range of topics, not just work related, get to know, the employees on a personal level, and build that bond, especially if you've got a hybrid work environment. So looking at that, that difference, the folks that are, meeting more regularly with their managers know them, understand what their needs are much more likely to stay versus those that are considering leaving. Then the second piece we look at is satisfaction. How satisfied is the workforce? And here we ask the same kind of 12 questions about satisfaction motivators, things like how happy are you with your current level of recognition? How satisfied are you with job security? How satisfied are you with compensation? And in addition to asking how satisfied they are, we also ask how important it is, because we think it's important to focus on not just that pure satisfaction level, but also the importance, so that you're not focusing your scarce resources on something that they might not be satisfied with, but they also don't care about. And then it also allows us to create a nice, colorful 3x3 matrix to kind of give you the ideas. So here's the satisfaction survey, the results, looking at the satisfaction and then also that importance. And so anything in the green is, for us, things you really don't have to worry about. Satisfaction is relatively strong, and it's relatively important, or it's not as important. Satisfaction is kind of, mid-level. The yellow areas are kind of that next degree down, kind of middle satisfaction, but middle to low importance. And then the orange are the areas of a little more concern, in that it's, satisfaction's not so high, but it's also very important. And then we haven't historically had anything in red at the global survey, which is nice, but those would be the areas you definitely want to track or tackle first. But again, because you can't and you shouldn't address all those issues, all those motivators at the same time, we really do, especially if you're doing this internally, recommend focusing on those issues that are, of high importance and kind of moderate satisfaction. And sorry, hit the wrong thing. We'll dig in a little bit into those details. So I think from the good standpoint, this year overall satisfaction improved slightly. There was a 1% increase. And interestingly, the importance for all of the different motivators across the questions that we asked rose by about 3%. And satisfaction with having an impact, having responsibility, and being recognized all rose pretty well between 3% and 5%. So people are feeling that they're being recognized, they're getting appropriate levels of responsibility, and are generally satisfied with those aspects. Not surprisingly, on the maybe more negative side, satisfaction with job security fell by 5% from last year. That I don't think should be a surprise to anybody. And satisfaction with compensation fell slightly by about 3%. So people are a little bit less satisfied with the compensation levels. And then maybe on the surprising side, Gen Zs and millennials were on average 6% more satisfied across all of the motivators than Gen X. So, thinking about, again, as a Gen X, thinking about the disaffected youth, we're not seeing that necessarily in the data right now. Just looking at kind of the satisfaction rankings. So this is, number 1 was the highest satisfaction down to number 12, lowest satisfaction across the years 2020 into 2022, 2023. And, a couple of interesting things that jumped out, for us as we kind of looked at it. One, obviously, every year you get some movement in terms of, what's where people are in terms of satisfaction, but then also, moving from that green to orange to yellow. 2020 people were pretty happy, pretty satisfied, and feeling good. So, a lot of green across all of the motivators. And then, a big drop as you went into 2022, and then a further drop into 2023 in terms of satisfiers moving kind of into that orange level. Obviously a drop in job security from 2022 to 2023, although, not necessarily surprising. They were very satisfied with it in 2022. Again, it was a employee market, I think, if you will, and then, or a seller's market. And then obviously as we get into the challenges, the uncertainties this year, that dropped fairly significantly. And then obviously appropriate compensation kind of leading the bottom of the list, if you will, for the last couple of years. Again, not necessarily surprising, but we saw a big fall in 2020 to 2023. It fell about 17% in terms of overall satisfaction. So a lot of people are less satisfied with their compensation levels. And then just, kind of briefly on the good side, we did see that big increase in satisfaction on, I'm having an impact and I'm getting, appropriate levels of responsibility. So it both moved in importance and it moved in satisfaction, which I think means that as, as leaders, as managers, we're doing a pretty good job of helping our employees get engaged and doing the work, giving meaningful work to our employees. And then we talked about job security and satisfaction, kind of, moving down the list. Satisfaction, though, for Gen X on the job security side fell the most, almost 10%. And actually, job security for millennials rose a little bit. So they were seeing a little bit of maybe opportunity in the changes. And then regarding compensation, interestingly, Gen Z and millennials, their satisfaction with compensation actually increased a little bit. But there was another kind of 10% or so drop in Gen X satisfaction. So a lot of that shift was driven by Gen X disappointment, dissatisfaction with the compensation, but Gen Zs and millennials seem to be okay with with the compensation packages and maybe the moves that they're seeing in the through the organization. We did dive a little deeper into what, from a compensation standpoint, what would make you more satisfied? A question that we've asked for all the years of the survey. And obviously, I think this year we're seeing, cash is still king. The cost of living increases has now kind of taken the lead overall with merit increases. So truly cash-based compensation improvements taking the lead. But people also want to know what their potential is. So it was interesting to see a big jump in looking at feedback on local wage rates. Actually, a couple of the comments said, yeah, local wage rates are nice, but we want to actually see what it is nationwide. Personally, I see a little bit of challenge in that, but it was interesting feedback nonetheless. And then I think, going to, Christine's comment, early on about, kind of mobility and opportunity, we saw another increase again, this year back up to kind of 2020 levels in terms of communicated and consistent opportunities, bonus opportunities in this case. So, as part of that progression, as part of the succession planning to say, hey, here's where you can go, here's what the opportunities are, that might be another opportunity to create kind of stickiness within the workforce. And then we broke out the satisfactions by generation. In this case, looking at Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. Overall, as we talked about, Gen X is kind of the least satisfied and has the most motivators in that orange category. So kind of a lot of challenges. I'm just, I guess, more disengaged than everybody else as a Gen Xer. But then, looking at the millennials, where, half of the motivators, they're, kind of in the green. They're feeling good about job security, having an impact, the work environment, all, kind of positive. And then Gen Z also relatively positive in terms of the things they're interested in and concerned about. There was a kind of interesting disconnect in satisfaction in the work-life balance between Gen Zs, millennials, and Gen X. Gen X, okay, kind of in the middle with millennial, but then Gen Z is not liking that work-life balance and being even lower than appropriate compensation. So as we're looking to bring more Gen Z into the workforce, I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to consider, not necessarily, kind of acquiesce to everything that they want, but consider what's important to them and maybe dig deeper into the issues that they're finding. And frankly, this is a little bit more eye candy, I guess, across the board in terms of looking at those, all the 4 generations and the 12 different motivators that we have. And again, across the board, Gen X is kind of less satisfied than any of the other generations. talked about that the brunt of managing through the chaos has kind of fallen into the Gen X lap, and I think that's having an impact. Two of the exceptions here are Gen Xers feeling that they're able to have an impact, and a slight edge in appropriate compensation, which we'll see on the next slide. Talked about Gen Zs and millennials are some of the most satisfied across all of the metrics, which again, I think points to a couple of positive trends. Leaders are doing a better job of communicating, going back to, I think, Christine's question earlier, doing a better job of communicating with their Gen Z and millennial employees, showing them the value, that they're feeling valued, having clear goals, I think are all due to that good communication. And the work environment, primarily hybrid still, seems to be working. Millennial satisfaction with their work environment rose 16% from 2022, and actually Gen Z was up 14%. So as we're settling into what we're calling the new normal, that seems to be working for the younger generations. And again, kind of the last 6 of our 12 motivators, Gen X is kind of less satisfied across all of those. Interesting, Gen Z feels satisfied with the policies. Millennials have a strong satisfaction with their job security. I think that's probably looking around and saying, they're the next largest cohort as they move up, and there is, I think, going to continue to be a lot of opportunity for them. And overall, Gen Z is more satisfied with the compensation, but obviously from the other data, it's still an issue of concern. And actually kind of diving into that, the culture. So here we ask, a number of, again, sample questions. The organization values diversity, is a diverse place to work. People have a growth mindset. Leadership, this organization, I thought I fixed that. In this organization, communicates well with employees. For these types of presentations where we're looking at culture kind of globally, I'll say just up front, I don't necessarily find the culture questions provide that much insight, because it's kind of a aggregation of everybody, and you don't typically see a whole lot of movement across the questions. However, I think, Christine, to the previous point, these questions are really important at the employer level. So specifically knowing, what are the cultural attributes you're trying to have, and also maybe trying to avoid, and kind of digging into those. For the culture questions, this year we found a lot of consistency between 2022 and 2023. The perception of collaboration and communication from leadership has actually fallen, so dropped a little bit this year. And interestingly, Gen Z kind of across the board had overall the highest opinion of corporate culture. So, again, that the trope of the disaffected youth doesn't necessarily play out across the data. And again, because there wasn't necessarily a lot of kind of meaningful insight, we've only got about 5 minutes left. Didn't spend a whole lot of time there. 2 things I will note is if you do kind of the culture aspect surveys within your organization, we do see interesting kind of splits and we look at it between leadership and kind of the employees. There tend to be interesting splits between kind of communication and usually around kind of growth mindset. So if we ask, leadership communicates effectively with the employees, leadership typically says, yeah, wow, we're great. We're 4.5 out of 5. And the employees are saying, yeah, no, you guys are really around a 3.5. So there's a difference in the split between perceived communication from leadership and then to the employees. And then the reverse side of that is around like perseverance or as I mentioned, maybe growth mindset, where the employees are saying, yeah, we stick to it. We persevere through all of our challenges, or we're engaged in helping the company grow. We feel really strongly about that. And leadership, no, not so much. So you see these kind of between leadership and the employee base, some differences. And then very kind of digging into it kind of briefly, and we've started to talk about some of these things, so some of it will be a little bit repetitive. But how do you use the information? We've got some of the data in the final minutes, kind of having a conversation and discussion about, some of the actions you can take. And I think, in terms of building that engagement level at the top, obviously the base is your core values, as we talked about. What are the values that you want? What are the values you don't want? Asking your employees through, engagement surveys, pulse surveys. The surveys themselves are good, but then we kind of take that data and do a deeper dive when we're working with clients to, do interviews at the employee level to kind of get a better feel for it. Training your leaders, training them around, communication. How do you, meet one-on-one with your employees? And then that communication aspect that we've talked about is so important, especially in this hybrid workforce. So talking about asking your employees, conduct a survey. We ask a lot of companies, and they haven't done employee surveys in 2+ years. It's a great time to do that now. Talking about stay interviews. Typically, it's better if you can have a third party come in and kind of do it from a kind of anonymity, feeling secure, and having that conversation. But HR can do it. Have those stay interviews. What do you like about working here? What don't you like about working here? Just have managers take employees out to lunch, drop into the break room. Simple things that you can do very effectively and very relatively inexpensively to assess where you're at, and also start to have that image of, yes, we're interested, we want to make changes. On the training your leaders, we talked about this, that weekly one-on-one informal meetings with your direct reports is a great place to start. Again, it's free, and starts to build that rapport and that interaction, the connectivity. And then, providing coaching. How do you manage in a remote hybrid team? A lot of companies have been doing well with this, but I think there's still more to do. And especially as we settle into a more consistent hybrid environment, now is a good time to make sure that your managers, your leaders are kind of comfortable in that environment. And then finally, that communication, values, talk about your values. What are they? Are you living up to them? Communicate the why of decisions. That shows up in a lot of our survey results, that leaders aren't necessarily good about. They tell you what the decision is, but they don't necessarily tell you why. And in kind of environment of incomplete information, people tend to go to the worst possible reason, and so they dive there. So if you can communicate that why, that kind of limits that. And of course, don't forget about your remote and hybrid workers. So that's kind of high level from there. And we'll drop this into the chat, but with the talent strategy collection, there's a kind of assess your talent management strategies. So it's a quick survey that you can take that will spit out a kind of customized report, kind of highlighting where your strengths are in your talent management journey, possible next steps. Again, you can take a look at that in the chat from a link. And then, feel free to reach out to myself, to Aaron. Got a link for the talent strategy collection as well.